Welcome to the Handyman Pros Radio Show, home improvement and maintenance tips from the pros.
Welcome to the Handyman Pros Radio Show Action Edition, where we feature an actionable tip that you can use today. And I'm here with my old buddy Larry. Larry, what you been doing lately?
Well, John, I have been working with my friend Dan. We had Dan on the show. He is the Athens Handyman GA, a.k.a. he lives in Athens, Georgia. And so he works under the name Athens Handyman. And we've been doing this project. It's been a basement remodel. It's been a pretty big one. But yesterday, your co-host was doing plumbing. And along with having a plumber's shirt, the special one that leaves a big crack in it, yes, that's correct, I had some issues yesterday, John. I had issues with CPVC plumbing pipes. Now, big surprise out there, right, John? John, tell me what you know about CPVC, and I will relate my experience about broken and cracked pipes.
Yeah. Well, they're kind of an animal unto themselves.
They are.
You know, they're white. They're kind of off-white if you see them. And Larry, you can describe what color and everything that you saw, because people, our audience is going to run into this kind of thing, and you have to be aware of it because they have some unique characteristics. And one of them is that when you first put them in, they are kind of pliable. They're okay, but then they get very brittle through age. As I read here about them, is that their pressure-bearing capability actually increases with age. However, with that comes being brittle. And if you've never worked with these things and they're older, they look like regular plastic pipe, and you can just go ahead and cut them in a plastic pipe kind of way.
And this is not the case, I can tell you.
You're in for kind of a surprise, right? Isn't that what you found out?
Yeah, that's what I found out. So CPVC, folks, if you don't know, there's PVC pipe and CPVC pipe, and if you go into the big box store, the CPVC pipe is actually for what they call potable water, meaning water if you're going to drink. It's for drinking water. And and PVC pipe is not technically for potable water. So anyway, it's slightly compared to the PVC, which you're all if you go in the big box store, that's all the white pipe. Anything from a half an inch up to, 4 or 6 inch pipe they make in PVC. So that's what you see the most of. But if you go a little farther down the aisle next to the copper, usually you'll find sticks of this kind of yellowish plastic pipe, and that is CPVC. And CPVC was used a lot, I'm going to say back probably, what do you think, John, in the 90s, early 2000s to plumb new homes. So we're seeing it now 20 years down the road, and we are working on this house, and again, we're doing a remodel in the basement, but I had to tap into some of the hot and cold water lines on the CPVC side. Now, normally anytime I cut any kind of plastic pipe, particularly this pipe happened to be overhead, but anytime I cut it, I usually use a saw. I actually use a multi-tool saw with usually a pretty sharp blade. When you do cut plastic pipe that way, you rarely have a problem. Rarely. And in fact, when I was cutting the pipe, I did not have a problem. Where I ran into the problem was I was actually I was tying into a 3/4 inch pipe with PEX. I put a PEX, a shark bite actually in the middle to put a T in, which worked fine. That was fine, no problems. I cut out a section, slid it in. But I went and as I put the PEX in, there was a 1/2 inch line that was teed off I think I was going to the cold water side, and this was coming off the hot water side. Now, folks, I had the water off in the house, and thank God I had the water off in the house. And what happened is that I really didn't put a lot of pressure on it, like really very, folks, let me tell you what, if this was a dumb thumb thing, if I was just being, dopey contractor and I hit this thing and it snapped, I hit it with a hammer and it snapped, I'd tell you that. But folks, this was not that. This was, I just was pushing the pipe in, and there was a little bit of tension on the CPVC, or on the PEX, excuse me, and it moved over next to this 1/2 inch line that was coming off the hot T side. I was working on the cold side. And the next thing I know, I look at it, and it's hanging there. Like, literally, it broke off at the joint. And I said to myself, oh, my God, I didn't put any pressure on that to speak of now. And when I say that, I'm talking about maybe it was 3 or 4 pounds of pressure. It was not huge. We're not talking about like I put my muscle on, or I was swinging a hammer and I hit it or something like that. This was just a little pressure. And it snapped off the pipe at the T. This was a lateral, we'll call it lateral pressure, right? So it was sideways, and it was really very slight. That led to a whole, long effort because I didn't have the conversion joints and so forth and so on, and I ended up cutting it, blah. It added 2 hours to the job. This was my big concern when I was working with CPVC, and I've worked a lot with CPVC in the past, and I'm always the tip is this, folks: if you have CPVC and say it's coming through underneath a sink, and you just want to change out your sink faucets, be very, very careful when you're handling that CPVC because of if it's old, it's brittle. And if you don't have the water off in the house and you happen to twist that thing the wrong way and it snaps inside your wall, you've got a serious problem.
Yeah. That's going to add a couple of hours to the project.
Or more, right? And I would tell you, even after as easily as this broke, which I was really kind of shocked. Now, John, CPVC has some other characteristics, right? It tends to get more brittle if the water system has a lot of chlorine in it. At least that's what I've read, right?
Yes. Yeah.
In this particular case, these people are on well water.
Yeah.
And I was a little surprised because, their well does not have any chlorination to it at all. Because we've actually worked on their water system as well. So in the process of working on their water system, there's no chlorinator out there. So I was like, wow, okay. So I was really surprised. Anyway, the long and the short is, the tip is if you're working on CPVC, just be very, very careful. Because if you still have the water on the house and that thing shatters, you've got a flood. And you better know, we've said this before, but you better know where your water shutoffs are. And not the water shutoff under the sink, because you'll snap it off back inside the wall, and you're going to need to get it off at the main, like ASAP.
Yeah.
So that's the tip.
Yeah, that's a good tip. That's a good tip for anybody that's out there going to make a change to their faucets. Just to be very aware of that stuff can go sideways on you there. And there are some special little cutters for this stuff, because if you don't ever take a pair of scissors, big snips that you might use on some other type of plastic plumbing, and try to cut through it, because it'll shatter. And these little devices are just what most plumbers will carry with them to cut copper pipe. They're just like little round rings that they put around. You make a couple of trips around the pipe, and boom. It separates
and you cut it. Yeah, and you cut it off.
So
or a really sharp tooth saw blade, like I was telling you. I use it on a multi-tool, but make sure it's sharp. Don't use a dull one, because you'll crack it the same way. You got to use a sharp one, and generally, like a good crosscut blade works really, really well. That's what I happened to use yesterday. I used a crosscut blade, and it cuts right through it, and it leaves it pretty clean. Yeah, if you cut it with a saw, you do have to clean off some of the wood.
So these other little cutters, cut it really, really clean. But anyways, the point here is that when you're handling this stuff, it takes a special tool, and just be aware of that the characteristics of this pipe gets changes over time.
Right.
So if you had put it in originally, you might think that it's still flexible too, right? Because time catches up quick. So and you never know what kind of minerals in the water react with some of these plastic these plastic pipes.
Correct.
So,
all right. I think that's it, John. Is that it? Is that the tip? Yeah,
Yes.
It's a good tip. All right, folks, don't forget to join our Facebook group. That's at Handyman Pros. Join the conversation. And once again, please send us emails. We want your questions, your jokes. We'll tell jokes on air if you haven't figured it out. John's pretty funny, and that's not just looking. Ba-dum-boom. I'll be here all week. Tip the wait staff appropriately and try the veal.
Yeah.
It's excellent. Right.
Yeah.
Anyway, questions at handymanprosradioshow.com. You can go to our homepage, and you can follow us on Twitter as well, and that's at Handyman Radio. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week on the Handyman Pros Radio Show.